Hello everyone, today we're looking at one of Steam's hidden gems, Cliff Empire. This game had a long early access period, but it finally released about 1 month ago. The game is awesome. It's a micro city builder set in a post-apocalyptic future. Now don't let the word micro turn you off. This game is jam-packed with content and things to do, and it's surprisingly a deep city builder. It's a sort of a cross between Anno and Surviving Mars. You're dealing a lot with logistics and the refinements of goods, but there is a survival element to it too, where you have to keep your colonists happy and keep them supplied. There's even a small bit of combat where you can get attacked by raiders and you have to set up defenses. If you really like that aspect, you can even switch the game to a kind of a tower defense mode solely to focus on that. Okay, so let's dial it back a bit and talk about the premise of the game first. Now, as mentioned, it's a post-apocalyptic future, but it's not really a dystopia, it's more of a utopia. So according to the story, Earth has succumbed to a nuclear war. A 300-meter thick radioactive fog makes inhabiting the surface impossible, and the remaining population now lives on these orbital stations. The aim of the game is to colonize these man-made cliffs and ship supplies back up to the orbital stations, and they'll also send you stuff. Now, later in the game, as you progress, you can eventually build on the orbital stations themselves and even colonize the surface of the Earth to unrestrict the building if you just want to create a nice big city. So when starting out, you can customize the game mode a little bit to make life easier or harder, or go with one of the preset modes, which is basically free building, regular playthrough, or tower defense. Once you start, you'll have 3 cliffs in front of you that you can kind of regenerate randomly, but once you actually begin playing on one, that's it for the rest of the campaign. So each cliff is its own autonomous area, everything is separated, even your own income stays on one cliff only. We'll come back to this concept a little bit later in the video. So when building up, you'll start off with a storage depot. That gives you a few resources to begin with as a sort of a supply drop. This comes with 3 cargo drones, and drones are what's needed to actually take the goods from one place to another. So all goods in Cliff Empire have to move from point A to point B, and typically goods are stored then in the storage depot. So when you want to build some houses, as an example, a drone will carry matter from the storage depot to the construction site, and once all the goods needed are in place, you're then charged with the money to build it. This is also an interesting concept because even if you're out of money, you can still place the foundations of buildings and gather all the materials needed. Then once you have the cash, the building charges you and it'll finish. So once you get some houses up and running, you'll build a landing pad and colonists will start arriving. They arrive in groups of 15 or they don't arrive at all, so you need the space for the 15 there first. So a colonist has a bunch of needs and desires, and this is where the game can get quite deep because there is a series of dependency chains even right from the beginning. So let's start as basic as we can. A colonist needs water, food, nature, 4 different vitamins, medicine, and generally good weather. Achieving all of these needs will mean that your manpower is 100% efficient. If you lack some of these things, then it causes a decrease in your manpower because they're too sick or too hungry to work. They don't die necessarily, they're just there, but they don't work. Buildings require this manpower to function. They offer jobs and available colonists will take those jobs automatically. So for instance, a farm will provide 4 jobs, and it'll also require 4 units of water. Once the water is delivered by a cargo drone, it'll then begin the production of food, but it'll take time. And that amount of time it takes is its efficiency. If all 4 jobs are filled, then the building will operate at maximum efficiency. When the cycle completes, 20 units of food are produced, and drones will carry it off to storage and replenish the water as well. It starts getting complicated when you run out of something. Let's say you start running low on that food. Well, then your manpower will go down because people don't have one of their basic needs. That means the farm that produces the food will now start taking longer to produce the food because it has a manpower shortage. This is just one example of a chain breaking down from a negative feedback loop. You need food to produce food, not directly, but indirectly through the workforce. But it's not isolated just to food. When manpower falls, it falls for everything equally. You'll produce less water, you'll produce less matter, you'll produce less of everything, and it's a real spiral to get things under control again, as the colonists are still there. They're not leaving, therefore you still have to feed them, you still have to give them water. Now on top of this, cliffs have different fertilities. The soil fertilities affect farms' productivity, so your manpower now combined with the soil fertility determines the output of the farm. Similar fertilities work for water and wind power and solar power and more, but you actually don't even know your own fertilities until you get your initial research lab up and running. So I mentioned power. Power is interesting as well because it actually fluctuates with the day and night cycle, as does the productivity of most buildings because people aren't working them during the night. Low power means lowered productivity in your buildings, slowing your production of goods down, excess power allows you to create batteries and store the extra power for later. There's a split between wind, solar, and nuclear. You might wonder why you'd ever use solar when it has the drawback of being powered down during the night. Well, with random events turned on, you can get storms or weather fluctuations that might cause your wind power to grind to a halt, or it might boost your solar. You never want to put all your eggs in one basket because of this, or at least you'll always want a high reserve of batteries, but you are limited in how much you can store in the stockpile, so you should have a good spread of all the different energy types. You can increase and upgrade your storage, but it is quite expensive. So hopefully you're starting to get a little bit of an idea of how this kind of complexity works at scale. I've just shown the most basic example of a need, but at scale, there's 10 resources consumed by your population. The vitamin category, for instance, is comprised of 4 separate goods: fish, veg, fruits, and grapes, and all 4 are needed to give colonists a balanced vitamin intake, but they are created in their own production buildings. They all require power, they require water, and can be affected by soil fertilities and weather. The goods that aren't needed directly and don't affect manpower directly, they're your luxury items. These are gadgets, appliances, and things like that. They typically require something to be refined into something else, such as matter into gadgets or grapes into wine. Fulfilling the cliff's needs for luxury items raises its prestige, which is needed to deliver more colonists. When this number falls, colonists are obviously going to leave your city. So once you're established and able to survive the initial first few days, you'll start producing goods and then using a teleporter to bring them to the orbital station. This is your primary method of making money in the game, by overproducing items and then selling them. Occasionally, you'll get requests and missions from the station where you'll have to sell a certain amount or produce a certain amount, and you'll be rewarded if you do. If you don't, you'll have to pay a fine. You can also use the teleporter to buy goods from the station, but it's typically quite expensive to do so. Now, as you build up your first cliff, you'll eventually get government buildings that let you view more in-depth statistics about your cliff. You'll take loans, perform upgrades, and things of that nature. You'll eventually start producing more drones for faster pickup and drop-off times. You'll be able to upgrade buildings to be more efficient and get high-rise offices that solely focus on producing money over time, but they require a lot of workers to operate. So eventually, you'll want to connect 2 cliffs together. As I said, each cliff is autonomous, so you can actually start building on all 3 at the same time if you like. You'll need a bridge to connect them though, and a bridge is built by both sides at the same time, so you need some sort of infrastructure over on the other one too. Once you get the bridge done, then you're able to send goods back and forth in a similar way to sending things through the teleporter. The teleporter arrives once a day for 2 hours and then it's gone, so you need to have a lot of drones ready to work with it if you want to make use of those 2 hours. But with a bridge, the trains run very frequently and you can set up buy and sell orders to exchange goods. However, this is where it gets tricky. A cliff needs money to buy something from the other cliff. Remember, the income is separated between the two. They each have their own treasury, so to speak. So if you choose to sell 50 matter from one to the other, then 50 matter will be loaded up on one side, it'll depart to the other side, and sit there until the other side has the money to actually purchase it. Then drones will unload it from the train and put it in the stockpile. It's a really odd system at first, but it lends itself really well to the micro kind of building in the game. You want to eventually work your way to the stage that you can have cliffs specialize in different things, but in order to trade, they need to be able to buy and sell an even amount of goods between them, or they need to be able to sell stuff to the station to offset the costs of the ground trade. It's pretty cool. Now, when it comes to the actual building itself, a large majority of the buildings are available from the very start of the game. It gives you a lot of freedom to experiment, but the game is balanced really well to the point that you'll naturally want to be starting small and build up because of how the income production chains work. If you end up building massive housing thinking you can just wait for them to fill up and assign jobs later, you'll end up filling them up with unemployed people, and they'll cost you money and resources to maintain, hurting the economy. This too can spiral because buildings cost money to make. So if you wanted to create jobs for unemployed people, you'd need the money to do so, but unemployed people take that money through social welfare. You gotta watch out for that. Lastly, there's over 100 buildings in the game with different aesthetics like modern and classical, and different functions that also have 2 to 3 different upgrade states as well. There's always a trade-off. Do you want more power, more consumption, whatever the case may be, or more space depending on the building type? The game is just an incredibly dense little city builder. And that's essentially as far as I've gotten in the game so far. I just find it really fun and very challenging to make money and grow. It's certainly a very difficult game, I think. Progression occurs over time. Your city earns honor points, and I believe it's achieving honor that allows you to advance to the orbital station and down to the ground. Honor is earned from completing missions and surviving disasters, so it just takes a little bit of time to kind of build up. In terms of presentation, I think the game looks really good. It's very smooth and enjoyable to play and build in. The UI could probably do with some work. It's kind of just programmer UI, but it's totally functional and it's clear to read. It's just a little bit plain and static, I would say. Some cool features is a screenshot mode where you can walk around your city, access to changing the lighting whenever you want, and an orthographic type view for a more simplistic building view. The only other sticking point for me is that when you're only doing okay and just getting by, the game can feel really slow because you earn so little on trade. This is what makes the game really difficult. You really have to forward plan a lot more than you think. Simply just getting by will get you nowhere, and it takes a few campaigns to learn that, I think. If you get stuck waiting for money to come in or waiting for technology to research, you should probably rethink and maybe restart, because you should be earning 500 to 1,000 per day on the trades alone, so that you can actually build things and plan for disasters. It's an easy trap to fall into. And that's really all for Cliff Empire. I just thought it was an interesting one to bring to your attention as we're between the kind of major releases right now. And as I said, I think it's a bit of a hidden gem in my mind. Now, even though it is an indie game and seemingly quite small, it packs a huge amount into it. Looks quite good aesthetically, and it's quite the challenge. Now, best of all, it's only $10, so I really think it's worth picking up and supporting, because I think they've done a fantastic job with it. Anyway, that is it for the video. Let me know what you think of the game in the comments below. Make sure to like the video if you want to see more obscure games like this one. Support on Patreon if you want to help this channel grow, and I'll see you in the next one.